Hello learners, this video has been crafted for a quick revision of the geography for the book of G.C.Leong, and we are starting from the chapter 2nd, and we are going to talk about the first three initial topics, and we'll discover the Earth's interior crust and moving on to the classification of rocks and how the rocks influences the types of landscapes. So let's revise together. You're watching the quick revision class for the G.C.Leong Geography Chapter 2, the Earth's crust. We are going to cover the first 4 topics of this chapter in this video, and the rest will be covered in the coming videos. So let's start. Now when we start talking about the Earth's crust, the main important thing is about the structure of the Earth. Now we all know that the structure of the Earth is something which is beneath and which we cannot see. But according to different volcanic eruptions, earthquake waves, and the deep mine operations, we find, it is because of the volcanic eruptions, earthquake waves, deep mine operations, and the crystal borings, we get to know that what is inside the earth or what is in the interior of the earth. Now, this is actually the basic section which shows the structure and composition of the earth when you cut the earth into two halves. Okay, so basically this will appear before you. Okay, now what are the basic domains of the entire earth is what we're going to talk about in the first section, the structure of the earth. Okay, so basically it is known that earth has got 5 major domains, which is lithosphere, atmosphere, barosphere, hydrosphere, and mesosphere. And as known, atmosphere is the outer area. It covers the outer region and forms an envelope kind of thing over the earth, and it is made up of different gases, and it has got an extension of about 15 miles from the oceans. So this is the atmosphere. The next what we are going to cover is your lithosphere, which is also called the earth's crust. So if you can understand, earth's crust means the topmost layer. Okay, and lithosphere is also made up of 2 parts. Actually, lithosphere has got 2 parts. Okay, so the first part is called the upper part, and the second part is called the lower part. Okay, so the upper part, this has got a density of about 2.7, and the density of the lower part is about 3.0. So as you can see, the density of the lower part is more, because of which the upper part will float on the lower part. Okay, now if we talk about the upper part and lower part in detail, so the upper part is made up of granitic rocks. To mention, granitic rocks are kind of stiff and harder rocks. Okay, and these granitic rocks actually forms what? The continents. Okay, so the continents are formed under the upper part as a result of the granitic rocks. And what are the mineral constituents of the continents? They are two major mineral constituents, and they are silica, which is represented by Si, and alumina, which is represented by Al. Okay, so in together they are referred to as the Sial. So remember this, the upper part is called the Sial. Next, if we talk about the lower part, the lower part is actually, again, as we know that it is denser, so it will float. It will be below the upper part, and the upper part will float on the lower part. So the lower part with greater density is actually a continuous zone. Okay, and it consists of the basaltic rocks. Now, as we know that the upper part was made up of what? Granitic rocks. The lower part is made up of what? The basaltic rocks. Okay, so now when we talk about the mineral constituents which is there, so there are 3 main mineral constituents available in the basaltic rocks region or the lower part of the lithosphere. Now what are they? They are silica, iron referred as Fe, and you have magnesium referred as Mg. But together we only mention it as Cma. Okay, so basically the lower part is in general referred to as Cma. So what we have to now together is Sial, which is the upper part, and the Cma. Okay, so in the coming videos, we will refer Sial and Sima. So it is said to be understood that we are talking about the upper part and the lower part of the lithosphere. Okay, so this is very clear, and this should be very clear that the Earth's crust is formed of Sial and Sima. These are the two things. Earth's crust, I am mentioning it, it's the crust. Okay, so be clear with it. Now if we talk about the next thing, now if you one more thing again to repeat, the continents, you're talking about the continents, they float on the oceans. Okay, and oceans are the lower part. So remember this image in your mind so that it's clear that how the lithosphere is present. Okay, next we are going to talk about is the core. Now, if we're talking about this core, this is in the internal structure. We talked about the atmosphere, which is the kind of envelope on the earth. Second, we talked about the lithosphere. Now we are turning inside. Okay, so inside we have this cute little small spherical circle seen in the image, but it's actually very, very, very big in reality. But we have never reached to this end. We have never reached actually the interior of the earth. So we only realize that what is present within this through the evidences from different volcanic eruptions, earthquake waves, and the deep mine operations, etc., which is created under the research. Okay, but the core, which is also called as barysphere. Okay, this is also called as barysphere. Now the feature of barysphere is that its mineral composition is what? Its mineral composition is iron, which is referred to as Fe, and nickel, which is Ni. Okay, but together they have given a name called knife. I'm so sorry. Together they have given a name to this barysphere, and that is called knife. Fe is for iron and Ni is for nickel. So together they call the knife. Okay, so till now we know that what is Sial, Sima, and now we have the barysphere or the core called the knife. Okay, now core, since it is subject to extreme high pressure. Now why are we talking high pressure? Because see, it's in the interior. Okay, the external elements actually create a kind of pressure onto it, and as a result of high pressure, the state of the core is said to be found as crystalline or the solid mass. They are very solidified. Okay, because of extreme pressure put on them. So this is barysphere, also referred to as the core. Now next thing that we have is the hydrosphere, which is actually the oceans. As you can see in this area, this is the hydrosphere, and hydrosphere is only the part of Earth's crust which is immersed by the seas and the oceans. Okay, so now with this we come to an end to the basic domains of the Earth, which are lithosphere, atmosphere, barysphere, hydrosphere, and the mesosphere. Okay, we haven't talked about the mesosphere yet, but what is mesosphere is actually the mantle portion. The mantle portion is also called as mesosphere, and you will find very dense rocks here. Okay, it's a region of dense rocks. So now when we talk about dense rocks, see, before that we have not talked about any sort of rocks in any of the major domains, but when we talk about the mantle, we're talking about dense rocks. So now we come into the introduction of rocks. So our next initiation with the topic will be regarding the rocks. So next we're going to talk about is the classification of rocks, and of course the types of the rocks, which are the three, that is igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic. Okay, moving on to the classification of rocks. Now when we'll talk about the classification of rocks, mind it that we're going to talk about the 6 basic factors, and that will actually help you to differentiate the different types of rocks or classify the rocks. Now what are those basic 6 factors? The first factor is the texture. Okay, the texture is very important to understand that what kind of rocks are found in which region of our world or India, whatever way we want to explore it. The second feature is the structure. Okay, structure as in the formation, size, whatever shape, and all of those. Third is the color. Now color is very much known how to recognize Okay, the fourth is the permeability. Now we're talking about permeability in the sense of being porous or permeable to different sort of elements around. Okay, the fourth is permeability. The fifth is your mode of occurrence. In which form do they occur? Now, what do we mean by mode of occurrence will be studied in the three categories that we're going to talk about in next 1 minute. Okay, and the last is the factor of degree of resistance to the denudation. You call denudation as the stripping off, like whenever we call about the stripping off of the trees from a region, that is a kind of erosion. So are the rocks resistant to that? Because can they hold the soil? Can they help the plants to stay despite of the denudation? That is what is important to understand. So these are the basic 6 characteristics that we'll see, consider in some or the other form while we classify the rocks. Okay, so now why are we talking about rocks in detail is very important to understand. So there are basic 2 factors. Okay, now first factor is that rocks actually help you to connect with the basis of the soil. Basis means basis. Basis means the formation of the soil, because in soil we definitely find rocks, and how they help the soil is important to understand. Okay, the second, they help us to understand a sort of natural vegetation which is found in a area, in a landform, or how can we use that land based on the presence of those rocks. Okay, so this is a basic understanding that you should have. That is why I just shared this with you. Next, we are going to directly switch on to the classification of rocks, which we were talking about, that how are the rocks classified. Okay, so now the classification of rocks has got those 6 characteristics that we talked about. Okay, so how is the classification done? So basically the classification is done into 3 categories, which is the first being the igneous rocks, the second being the sedimentary, and the third being the metamorphic. Now on a very basic introduction, let me tell you that the igneous rocks, they are actually formed by the cooling and solidification of the molten magma. Okay, that is within the earth's crust. Now when we're talking about molten magma, is of course, you know that the interior core is very much heated up and it has got lava which is said to cool and solidify, and that forms the rock called as the igneous rocks. And these do not occur in layers. Okay, they do not occur in layers like this. Okay, and also that they do not contain fossils. And why? Because they are formed by the lava formation, solidification of lava. Okay, so that is the basic thing of igneous rocks. And igneous rocks also have further classification into acidic igneous rocks and basic igneous rocks. When we are talking about acidic igneous rocks, it means they contain high proportion of silica. Silica is mainly present over there, and they have lesser density and their color is very light. What is the best example of acidic igneous rocks is granite. Now if you understand what is granite, you can imagine the color, the texture, the density. Okay, and when we are talking about the basic igneous rocks, what are the basic features? They have higher proportion of the basic oxides. Okay, and basic oxides like iron, aluminum, and magnesium, and their density is higher and the color is darker. So this in brief makes you understand what is igneous rock. Okay, this was a basic introduction to the igneous rocks. Okay, now next what we're going to talk about is, after all of this, now next we come to the sedimentary rocks. Okay, so if you're talking about the sedimentary rocks, the basic feature is that they're formed by the accumulation, the sediment accumulation. Now when we are talking accumulation, what do you understand by accumulation? मतलब एक के ऊपर एक ऐसे accumulate होना, ठीक है, इस तरह से accumulation होता है, that leads to the formation of the sedimentary rocks, and this happens over long periods of time. ठीक है, but it's important, this usually happens under the water. Now igneous rocks हमने बोला वो अर्थ क्रस्ट के अंदर होता है, और सेडिमेंट्री रॉक्स का ये लेयरिंग होता है वाटर के अंदर. ठीक है, तो ये जो लेयरिंग के फॉर्म में होते हैं, तो इनको हम लोग स्ट्रैटिफाइड रॉक्स भी बोलते हैं, क्योंकि स्ट्रेटास में ऐसे मिलते हैं. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट इज द टेक्सचर. सो दे आर वेरी फाइन ग्रेन, दे आर वेरी माइन्यूट लाइक दिस, they are very fine grained and they are very soft. This is a basic feature. Igneous was not soft. Okay, igneous, like graphite is an example of hard rocks. Okay, so these are soft and these are broad. Now when you're talking about that they accumulate beneath the water, तो ये accumulation कैसे होता है? This happens by, or you can say when it is brought by the different means like glaciers, ठीक है, glaciers से, या फिर river streams है, ठीक है, या फिर जो animals हैं उनके द्वारा लाए जाने पे you get the sedimentary rocks set up beneath the water. Okay, and these are non-crystalline. Okay, we talked that igneous rocks are crystalline, but the sedimentary rocks are not crystalline. They are not in the crystal form. They are very grain type. They are like sand grain like this. ठीक है, तो ये एक फीचर है. अब चूंकि since we are talking that the animals are bringing this layering and all, so we can say that this sedimentary rocks also contains fossils. This is a very unique feature of the sedimentary rocks, that they contain the fossils. And these fossils are of animals, plants, microorganisms and all other living organisms which were dead. Okay, now with this we come to an end to the igneous and sedimentary rocks. Now what is the third category that we are going to focus upon is the metamorphic rocks. Okay, now the basic feature of metamorphic rocks is that these rocks are found when the igneous or the sedimentary becomes or changes into different forms under first feature great heat. Heat is a factor. Second feature is pressure. So under heat and pressure they turn into the metamorphic rocks, the igneous and the sedimentary. Okay, so igneous and sedimentary are the two types, and the third is the metamorphic, which is actually a combination of either igneous or the sedimentary rocks. Okay, and because of the intense earth movements, they definitely change into different forms, and few best examples are like clay. So clay is a kind of you can say the sedimentary rocks, and they turn into or they metamorphose into slate. Okay, similarly limestone, which is a sedimentary rock, that also turns into a marble. Then you have sandstone turning into quartzite, graphite into genesis, shale into schist, and coal into graphite. These are some of the examples of the metamorphic rocks. Now since we had a brief introduction of the igneous rocks, it's time to dig a little deeper into the igneous rocks types. Okay, now those types are plutonic rocks and volcanic rocks. In short, to understand what are plutonic rocks is, they are intrusive rocks. By intrusive I mean they are found within, and by volcanic rocks I mean extrusive. ठीक है, तो ये basic feature of difference होता है इनके बीच में. This is the basic difference. Next is that as I said, the plutonic rocks are formed within the earth's crust. Okay, and so they have cooled and solidified slowly to form the large easily recognizable crystals. ठीक है, as a basic feature we understood and we read that the igneous rocks are crystalline. So plutonic rocks, when they solidify within the earth's crust, also have crystalline forms. Okay, what are the examples? Granite, diorite, gabbro. So basically intrusive rocks has a basic feature that they are exposed at the surface by the process of denudation and erosion, as we talked about. Okay, so you remember we talked about the 6 basic features of the classification of rocks. That's when we understand the degree of resistance to denudation. So intrusive rocks are resistant to the denudation. Okay, now after finishing our intrusive rocks, we move on to the extrusive rocks. Now extrusive rocks are actually also called molten rocks, and they are poured out of the nose as lavas, which solidify and rapidly turns up into the earth's surface. तो ये जो earth होता है ना, इसके surface पे ये form होने लगता है. ठीक है, ये अर्थ क्रस्ट के, ये अर्थ के अंदर होता है, और इंट्रूसिव अर्थ के अंदर होता है, एक्सट्रूसिव अर्थ के बाहर होता है. दैट इज अ मेन फीचर. अगेन वन ऑफ द बेस्ट एग्जांपल ऑफ इंट्रूसिव क्या है? बसाल्ट. बसाल्ट का नाम विल हियर वेरी मच, सो अंडरस्टैंड दिस. बसाल्ट इज अ सॉर्ट ऑफ extrusive rock, and it helps in forming the lava flows, lava sheets, and lava plateaus. Okay, and there are basic examples of these basalt rocks: Antrim in the Northern Ireland, Deccan Plateau in India, Columbia Snake Plateau in USA, and other examples. Okay, so one of the basic feature of igneous rocks is their use. They are used for road making, polished as monuments and gravestones. Okay, so this is how we turn up to the end of igneous rocks. Next, we are going to head towards the sedimentary rocks. Okay, talk about the classification of the sedimentary rocks based on age. Now, there are three basic classification of the sedimentary rocks, and they are: first is the mechanically formed, the second is the organically formed, and third is the chemically formed. Now, the basic difference between the three is that how are they formed. The mechanically ones are formed by the accumulation of materials which are derived from other rocks, okay, and they have been cemented together. The best example is sandstone. Like, how is sandstone made? They are made up of grains plus granite. So this is how the mechanically formed sedimentary rocks are done. Second is the organically formed. Now when we talk about organically formed, they are formed in two different forms. Okay, first is, if they are formed by the remains of living organisms, then they turn into the calcareous type rocks. Example, limestone and chalk. And in second stage, if they are formed from the vegetative matter like swamps and forests, then they turn into carbonaceous rocks, and they turn into carbonaceous rocks which compresses under direct or much heat and pressure and turns into compact masses of carbon. Okay, and that further turns and converts into peat, lignite, and coal, which are of high economic value. Similarly, the chemical formation happens when there is a rock precipitation done manually by the chemical solutions. Okay, the best example is the rock salt, because the rock salts are derived from the strata or the bed of seas or lakes. Similarly, gypsum is also obtained from the evaporation of salt lakes such as Dead Sea, because they have high amount of salinity. Okay, and similarly potassium nitrates are also received. So this was basic introduction to the three. Now there are some basic introductory pointers for the mechanically formed, like there is a variation in texture, color, and composition that will be seen, and you will find that there are different use of these, because mechanically formed, when we are saying, then there are different categories. Okay, and each category has got their own power or their own characteristics. Now the categorization happens into grit. It is said to be a coarser type of sand. Okay, the first is the grit. It is said to be a coarser type of sand. Second is conglomerate. Okay, now conglomerate is said to be a kind of larger rock which is formed by the cementation of rocks. Then you have is breccia. Breccia is formed by the round, and their breccia is actually the rounded pebbles, or they have angular fragments. And the fourth is the clay. Now clay, everyone knows, they are finer sedimentary materials and can be used for the brick making, shale, or the mudstones. And the last one is the sand and gravel, and as said, they occur in the uncemented form. Okay, so this is what was about the sedimentary rocks in detail. With this, we come to an end to the types of or the classification of rocks. Okay, next we will see the influence of rock types on landscape. Okay, that is what to be seen. Now there's one important factor that you should understand, that landforms, we already said that landforms and rocks are very much together, they are very much related to each other. Okay, now the rock types, how do they influence the landscape, is what we have to understand. Landscape is referred to different types of landscapes, like your mountains, your plains, plateaus, and all of the other things. Okay, now why am I saying that the rocks influence the landscape? Suppose if there is a landscape which is formed of clay, and on the other hand there is a landscape form of granite. So you know that clay is a form of sedimentary rocks, and sedimentary rocks are very softer. Okay, and granite, as I say granite, you remember that the igneous rocks are strong and stiff, so they are harder. So this will let you know that how frequently open up are these landscape to different kind of erosion or different kind of parameters of the environment. Okay, that is why this is what we have to understand in terms of the rock types influence on the landscape. Now there are a few examples that you can refer to. This can just be given a basic reading, like in West Malaysia, what are the formations found in terms of the types of igneous rocks. And basically the igneous rocks form smooth slopes and rounded hilltops. Mind it, they form rounded hilltops. Okay, and one of the highest peak of West Malaysia is Gunung Tahan, which is said to be formed of the resistant quartzite. Okay, and similarly the types of sedimentary rocks, they'll form lower and rounded hills due to being less resistant. And the third, like river sediments, will form flat plains, and the limestones, they will form different kind of steep sided hills because of their permeability. Okay, and because of their permeability they are resistant, so they'll form steep sided hills. Okay, and one of the locations is, I think, in Ipoh in Perlis. Okay, so you can refer to that in the map. Now with this we